Hi, I'm Charlie McLennan, Bristol Applied Bee Consulting. Today I want to talk to you about is coronavirus, or Covid-19 as it's called, and the 7 steps you can take to prepare your organisation for what is possible an incoming pandemic. This is one of the first times I've done one of these videos, so maybe have to bear with the camera work and how I present. I'm hoping that you'll bear with us because I think the content is fairly good. So if you can kind of take into account that myself learning to do this, then hopefully you'll watch this video. Because I think the important thing about this is the time to do something is actually now. We have a little bit of a window of opportunity for you to get your organisation prepared so that if or when the pandemic comes, you've got your ideas in place and you're ready to go. The 7 steps which we're going to look at is, firstly, step 1 is going to be where you're going to get advice from. So where do you get that advice from and which websites to use? Step 2 is understanding the impact of coronavirus on your organisation and understanding whether your demand for your products and services will go up or go down. Step 3 is mitigate the impacts and improve the organisation's resilience. So what can you do to mitigate the impact of coronavirus on your organisation? Step 4 is decision making and information management. So how is your organisation going to manage this, the pandemic, and how you're going to put your response together? Step 5 is to review your HR practices. So how are you going to manage this, your people? Step 6, prepare your scenario responses. So what are you actually going to do and how are you going to respond? And step 7 is prepare your communication plan. So those are the 7 steps we're going to go through on this video there. Step 1. You first of all need to decide where you're going to get advice from. The web is full of misinformation, quack cures, and lots of people's view, including mine, of what we should be doing. I think one of the first things you need to do is decide where you're going to get your information from. And I think on the whole, it's best to go for government, fairly straightforward to go for your government advice. So one of your first jobs is to look on the web and say, what are the government advice and where should you get advice from? I think you also need to designate somebody whose job it is to look at this advice daily, because it's going to change. And I think you need to have one designated person who's going to scan the internet, look on the sites that you're subscribed to and see how that information changes, so that if there are any changes that affects your organisation, you can comply or make any changes which are required. You have to also notice that there are maybe regional or national differences of information. So in Europe, there may be different information, or maybe the information from America is different from the UK. If you're just in one country, that's quite easy. But even if you're in Scotland, there may be different advice from Scotland as there is from England. And so what you'll have to do is make sure that you take all those regional differences in information into place, because they may follow different formats, they may follow different advice, and you need to, if you've got organisations in that country, then you need to take account of that advice. Now, in all good instance, we always teach people to log information, and I think one of the bits about here is that if you're logging information, you should log information throughout the incident. If you're taking advice off websites and you act on that advice, the information may not be overwritten or may not be available again. And if there's any inquiry or there's a court case after the event, you may have to justify what information you did and how you interpret it. If you've logged, so you maybe should take screenshots of the information you acted on there and then, because that will be a useful source of information, and it may not be you may not be able to get historical information, as the information may be updated on a day-to-day basis. So make sure that you log information like all this incident, but make sure you log where you got the advice from. Right, step 2. What you need to do is understand the impact of coronavirus on your organization. And one of those key things to say, is it going to make a change in your demand for your products and services? So, it's fairly obvious if you're a hospital, medical services, or maybe you run the, medical helpline, then the amount of demand is going to go up. So that's fairly obvious. And if you're a medical equipment company, again, your demand is going to go off. But if you think about, if you're a cleaning company, then the demand for your cleaning may go up as well. So, do you need to think about that? Do you need to take on extra staff? Or do you need to just think about, I'm only going to service my existing customers? So think about your demand. If you're an airline, a hotel, holiday providers, anything to do with tourists, especially where you get visits from foreign tourists. If you're an event organizer, if you're running a festival, if you're running venues, then you had to think about, actually, is my demand going to go down? Or is there a possibility my events are going to be closed? And you have to kind of think about, if you're an event organizer, what is the last safe moment where you can actually say, right, this event's going to go on, or this event's going to go closed. So certain organizations are going to have a lowering of demand, or likely to have a lowering of demand. If you run something like a shop, if you're a supermarket, people still need to buy food. So you're still likely to have the footfall, but are people going to buy their maybe supermarket shopping a different way? So they'll do maybe a lot more click and collect or delivery. So do you need to be thinking about, actually, we need extra delivery drivers, or we need extra people to do click and collect, because that's where the demand is going to do. If you're something like a clothing shop, or beds or sofas, then are people going to go out and buy beds and sofas? Or clothing, or are they going to wait till the end of the sort of pandemic is over? So is your demand and your football likely to go down there? So look at your demand there. The next thing is to look at your supply chain and have a look at, to say, actually, is any of your things you manufacture, or parts of things you manufacture, or part of your services delivered from China? We've already seen that Apple's got some issues with parts of their iPhone because they come from China. We've also seen that car manufacturing has some of it has stalled because of the fact is they haven't got the parts. And you have to think about your product. Even the majority, 90%, comes from maybe locally produced, but you have one piece that comes from China, then your product may not be able to deliver, because the fact is, if you're missing that one bit, the whole product can't be sold. So think about that supply chain and thinking through your supply chain. Now, it's also, you must note, is that because recently there's been a Chinese holiday, then a lot of companies will send their workers home, but they will stockpile or push through into the supply chain to make sure they cover off the 2-week annual Chinese holiday there. As a lot of factories are still not going back to work because of the lockdown, then you need to think about, actually, is the factory which my products are being actually made, is that open or closed? Now, also, if you think if your products come by sea, there's a 3 to 6 week lag between the actual stuff leaving China and actually arriving there. So you're getting the supplies at the moment, but actually, that is going to dry up soon because there is not the next lot of supplies coming that. So you need to think through your supply chain. Do you want to think about increases of prices? If everybody's trying to buy the same things, then there may be increase in prices. And I was at the BCI forum recently, and one of the people there was talking about to say they managed to source supply of masks for their people in China because he said, you were only allowed to send people back to work if they had a month's supply of face masks. So that's the way Chinese do it. So they had to try and get their people back working. They had to go and find these face masks. They found some in Brazil, which originally come from China and then come back from Brazil. And one of the things he said was the price was 10 times when they bought them 6 weeks ago. So various people, items in short demand are going to be hiking the prices. So you have to think about is there a possibly impact of prices, and can that have an impact on your delivery of service or your business model? You also want to think about actually how customers look at information, or how customers interact with your organization may change. We've already talked about the click and collect and supermarket, but are services which are usually delivered face to face, so like delivery services when you've actually got to sign for the information, parcels, where you walk into banks, when you walk into local authorities, when you walk into advice services, is that demand going to be a lot less? So you need to be thinking about, actually, can I do this more on the web? Can I do this on call centers? Or do you actually need to set up a call center because your customers may be worried about your delivery of services or products, and actually you need to get information to them, and one of the good ways to have a call center there. So think about the changing demand of your customers and whether you need to do something. I think, we've talked a little bit about business models, but you have to think about your cash flow. Especially for small businesses, if you don't have the money coming in and you still got all the staff and all the overheads, do you need to think about your cash flow? Do you need to start maybe not taking on the extra staff you might take on for the summer, for your summer seasons there? Do you want to actually have a conversation with your bank and actually say, well, look, can we put in an overdraft facility? We don't normally have to have one, but we might want one. I suspect there might be some help from government on this, but I think, again, so the part of this whole presentation is you thinking about, what can I do now? How can I prepare so that if it gets bad, then we are ready and know what we're going to do? So that is step 2. Step 3 is about mitigating the impacts and improving your organization's resilience. So we know what the impacts are now. We need to look at what we can do to mitigate the facts of the pandemic, and also we have to mitigate what the government may impose on us. So if the government say, actually, if you have a case in your office, then you've got to send every member of staff home for 2 weeks, then you've thought about how you're going to manage that, what you're going to do with that, and how you're going to mitigate that loss of production. And one of the things everyone is really talking about here is about working from home. So, of course, not everybody can work from home, but let us think. So one of the ways you mitigate is working from home. So if you're working from home, you have to think about laptops. Where am I going to get laptops from? Staff use working on desktops. One of the classic things is people taking their laptops home. So you need to make sure they take them home each day, because if the office is suddenly closed, you may not get back into the office to retrieve your laptop. And don't forget to take the cables home, especially if you have a docking station. Then actually you can take your laptop home, but if you don't get the power cable, your laptop's going to go flat. Think about your VPN numbers, because if not that many staff VPN in, then you need to make sure that you've got more VPN space. And also think about big data users. So if you're a developer, you might use very big chunks of data, and so that maybe affect the speed of your VPN. So you need to practice there. And we say you should be doing a work from home practice. So next week sometime maybe, run a work from home day and actually practice. Do people actually know how to log in? Can they remember their passwords? Can they remember how to get into the portal? How to, if you've got tokens, how that works. So practice it, or practice it, maybe different departments do on different days. Also think about whether you need more IT and desk people, so that actually people having difficulty logging on, then there is somebody to help them. So that is sort of one of the mitigations measures. You've got to think all about that hand washing and social distancing. So how are you actually going to implement that in your organisation? Because actually, you know, my reading on the situation, that's the two things you can do to slow down the spread of the virus, which is a good thing, and secondly, stop yourself getting it in the first place, which of course is another good thing. So, you know, washing your hands is the way to stop that, and social distancing, so spreading out your staff makes it less likely for people to catch off each other. So some of the things you can consider is splitting teams across buildings. Done quite some reading in Singapore, and they said that has been quite useful successfully there, especially teams that can't work from home. So you may have a finance team, got to get into portals and things, so they can't work from home. So if you split your team across two buildings, if one building is closed down, people sent home, at least the other building can work. Maybe think about segregating different parts of your office. So can you keep one floor to one floor, and say, right, actually, if you are in floor 3, you can only use the meeting rooms in floor 3, you can only use the washrooms in floor 3, you can only use the kitchen in floor 3, and maybe if you could have different entrances, or maybe even different lifts, then you're kind of, if you get a case in your building in floor 3, you can at least say, well, we'll send all floor 3 home, but we don't need to do floor 4 and floor 5 because they have been segregated from the other parts. So that may be something possible, depending on the makeup of your building, that you can do that thing. Make it easy to hand wash, lots of gels and all those kind of things around, so you can do that there. And think about your extra cleaning as well. Are you going to get the cleaners to come in every day as opposed to twice a week? More clean your desk, or get people to clean their own desks perhaps even, and also the social areas as well, so that you reduce the chances of people picking up the virus there. You can also think about how you deliver your services. So, you know, if you're Amazon or you know, a parcel delivery company, are you going to people not to sign for things? If you're going to get your click and collect, do you actually leave it on the doorstep and then the person comes out to collect it? You don't actually deliver it into the house, as many of these people do there. Can you persuade people to say, look, you know, go to our call center, go to our web, we'll put the information on there to avoid the face-to-face contact and keep that social distancing. You also think about stockpiling and pre-ordering of things. So can you stockpile, pre-order? Can you bring forward our supplies there? Or can you search out supplies you think are going to be short order, which are not now, but actually they might be later, so you can think about that. And can you think about local substitution of your supply chain? So can you actually buy stuff locally? You know, sometimes you might find it maybe a bit more expensive, but actually it might be better, and those suppliers can respond better to views. So not necessarily buying it from overseas. So those are some of the step 3 of how you can mitigate your impacts and make your organizations more resilient. Now, I think a key bit of this talk is not to say, right, you need to go and dash out and do those things now. I think what you need to have thought through all the different things you can do, and then we'll talk about this a bit later, but we can then bring them out as they deem required. So not split up your team now because they're working well together, and only when you need to is split them across the 2 buildings. So don't go out and do all the stuff now, but make sure you've thought through what you can do, what is possible to do, and what you can't do. Step 4 is all about decision making and information management. So pre-planning will only take you so far. You know, we can pre-plan some of our responses, what we're going to do, but decisions are going to have to be made pretty much on a dynamic basis, from changing circumstances, government guidance changes, and also you may be told to do things under government orders. So the government may say your festival is closed. We will not be having it. So you're going to have to make decisions dynamically. And also, in terms of decision making, you also need the information to staff and customers is vital as well. So in terms of that, you need a team who are going to do the communications and make the decisions. And I say that you should have a team, a pandemic team, maybe that's what you want to call them, and on a day-by-day basis, almost every day they should be meeting. Now they should meet maybe at 9 o'clock every morning or 10 o'clock every morning and have a short meeting. If circumstances have changed and they need to do more stuff or more guidance or put out more communications, fine, and they can do that. Otherwise, they can have a quick update. Yeah, nothing new here. And then they go on their day. But I think you need a dedicated team whose sole job in the pandemic is to make decisions and to review the incident. Now, one of the interesting things is about if you're a large multinational is how that works. Because again, at the BCI event I was attending recently, one of the people was talking about how you cope with the different time zones and trying to get decisions made. And because, Asia would ask a question which America would ask a question which Asia needed to answer because that was the senior team there. And then it was taking almost like 36 hours to get a decision there. So how do you take into the different time zones, which is the senior team there, and how does information get to the different time zones in a timely manner? So that has to be thought through. Or could you actually have the team meeting at, say, like 5 o'clock in the evening, which covers Asia, the Americas, as well as Europe? So again, with the team there taken into account. Now, I think this team should be a tactical team rather than strategic. So it shouldn't be the top manager, because I think top management need to be running the business, or you're running the organization, but also they need to be they also need to be maybe slightly distant so they can take large decisions which the pandemic team doesn't want to do. So if the pandemic team is just the senior managers, they have sort of almost nowhere to go and nobody to kind of use as a sounding board. So I think the strategic team, your crisis team, should not be managing this. You should have a properly constituted pandemic team, and then they will deal with the incident. In terms of who's on the team there needs to be a senior manager in charge of it, so that senior manager leads the team. And that can be your link up to your crisis management team as well. Human resources is absolutely key in this incident. And so you need to have a human resource person whose job it is to advise on the people aspects of this. And we will come on to that. There's quite a lot you can pre-plan, but there's always going to be questions which you're going to have to take back to the team. I've got medical advice or specialists. If you're a large organisation, you may have a medical advisor or a doctor on your team who can advise the team. If you're a small organisation, you may not. But one of the things important is this can be the person who looks at the government advice every day. Then they can come onto the team and advise and say, look, this is what the latest government advice and this is what to do. So that medical advice or specialist, or it could be your person who's reviewing the websites every day. Communications is absolutely key. So yeah, we need a communications person, and then they probably need a team of people who will actually work on the communications and send them out. So that the communications team might not be in the meeting, but at least the representative will be. You need an operational representative there who is going to look at across the organisation and look at, are we delivering our operations? Are we meeting customer requirements? Are our mitigation measures working? Do we need to change the way we operate? Do we need to switch things around? Are we meeting our recovery times if there are certain operations we might want to close? So you can use your recovery times, your business impact analysis for this. So they are making sure that the business continues there. IT and telecoms will be vital for health staff working remotely, maybe rerouting telephone calls if we need to reroute telephone calls. So they will have a really important role. Security may have a role, is they may provide receptionists, and they might also be aware of staff travel, so security may or may not be involved there. And I think facilities management have a really key role in this as well, in making sure that the buildings are looked after, the social distancing works, the hand washing and all those sort of things work. So I think they've got a very important role in the response there in the team. The authority and decision making of the pandemic team must be really clear. It should be pre-agreed and documented and known throughout the organisation. So your sort of top management needs to decide what powers and delegated authority does the pandemic team have, and what powers do they have to go refer back to the senior management team. So that needs to be decided upon. There should be deputies for the team if what happens if they get sick. So yeah, you need the deputies for the team there. Operational teams. So if you're a large organisation, you may have a number of different sites or may have a number of different divisions. So you need to have to decide upon, and this is good sort of business continuity, can you just use your business continuity plans there? And if you've got operational teams or operational people, business continuity coordinators, then you can use them as part of your process for managing this incident. One of the things I like when we did the planning for the last pandemic was to have a status sheet in the morning. So all parts of the organisation used to send in a status sheet, and it would have what numbers of staff had turned up today, what numbers of staff have phoned in sick, what is your impact on your organisation? Well, are there any pinch points? Are there any things not getting delivered? What is the morale of our staff? How's the service delivery going? And also, is there any feedback from customers? So you can use the operational teams to fill that in. So by 10 o'clock, you must have sent in your status report to the pandemic team. Pandemic team collates it and then sends it to the strategic team. So those are some of the items you can do to manage the pandemic. In that managing, the last bits there are information portal. Where are you going to make information available to people on the pandemic? So you can have an intranet site with lots of information there. Are you going to have questions and answers, which is good practice? Always have question and answers, and make sure somebody's job is there to update them. So that could be someone in the communications team on the pandemic team, or communications person on the pandemic team could be doing that. So you need to have that key source of information. Or you might be going to run a company helpline for particular issues, or you're going to have a company email address so that you can get sort of dynamic answers there. How are you going to actually inform people on a day-to-day basis of what is going on? So are you going to use the chain of command, so down the manager's chain there? Are you going to use social media, so like Slack or Yammer or some of those tools like that to get out information there? Or are you going to send out mass emails? Or are you going to get people to look at the intranet? So think through how the information is actually going to get to people and how you want to push it down. And I think in terms of our step 4, what is really important to me is the leadership of this organisation and leadership of this incident. People may be afraid, there may be some panic, there's disease there. I think people may worry about their family, they worry about their children, worry about their elderly relatives, because those are the people who, especially elderly relatives, seem to be the ones who get most affected with this. So I think leadership from our senior managers is vitally important here. So senior management visibility, maybe not physical visibility, because actually maybe you don't want your senior managers going around all the different locations spreading the virus if they were to have it. But at least the senior managers' visibility of the communications, maybe they could even do some sort of video updates. So senior manager visibility is key important. Good decision making is really important, and also making sure that decision making is consistent across the organization. We not have, there may be requirements for different responses, but we don't have in the UK, one department, sending all their staff home and they're all working from home. Another department they're all working there and haven't sent any staff home. So, consistency of response is important. And you need to keep the confidence of staff, because you're going to be heavily dependent upon them. And you're going to be very heavily dependent on their goodwill. So you need to make sure that you look after them, because if there's chaos and nobody knows, and conflicting information and rumours and all the rest of it, you are going to struggle to manage this well, and it's going to have a big impact on your organisation. So step 4, decision making, planning is a key bit of your response. Step 5, review your HR practices and check they could deal with the issues associated with the pandemic. So you will have your HR rules in there, but the pandemic is going to throw up some issues which you may not have rules on already. So you need to, I think, to do a brainstorm of all the different issues staff might do, and where you can't use existing rules, you need to change the rules because of the circumstance of the pandemic. You need to think about them now. So, will I work from home? Will I be paid? That's kind of a fairly obvious one. Everyone's going to ask that question, but it should be fairly obvious that yes. If I self-isolate myself, will I be expected to work from home? And what if I can't work from home? So, I think I'm at risk, so I go home for 2 weeks and I can't work. So how does that work? If I'm told to self-isolate, so, our office has been all told to go home, then do I take that as sick time? Is that me off sick? Do I have to take it as time off, or am I expected to work? And what happens if I can't work? If I'm working from home, if I can't work from home, do I have to come in if others are working from home? If I have to stay at home to look after my children, or because the school is closed, or I have a caring role, or I have to look after a sick partner, how does HR rules take that into account? Do I have to meet visitors, especially from another country? If you have to meet visitors for a country there's a high instance, say Korea or Japan, then are you expecting visitors, or do we just actually not have any visitors there? If I'm quarantined, you've seen the people in Tenerife. If I'm quarantined while I'm on holiday, then how does that work? Am I expected to work? If I can, I'll probably not take my laptop with me. So how do you deal with those sort of issues? There's a myriad of different questions there, and I think you should get your staff together or get your HR people together, brainstorm the sort of most likely questions, and think through how you're going to deal with them, how you're going to answer them. For me, as I said earlier, consistency is absolutely key, and we don't have different managers doing different things. And I think in the end, if you're guided by existing policies, your organisation norms, your culture and your values, they should give you a very strong steer of how to answer some of the more nuanced HR questions there. A couple of extra bits you may want to think about. What about staff with chronic health issues? So actually, is it safer, regardless of what everyone else is doing, is it safer to have them at home? Because actually, they are much more vulnerable than anyone else. And do you need to, let's not be too morbid about it, but do you need to dust off your death in service procedures, especially if you've never done this before? Do you need to think about, well, how do we deal with this, just in case the worst happens to your staff member? As I say, I don't want to get too morbid or too kind of depressed about this, but I think we have to be realistic to say, if the pandemic does really take a hold, it is likely people are going to die. And hopefully not in, well, you hope it's not in your organisation, but, it is possible. So how are you as an organisation going to deal about it? I think also something like those death and service procedures, I don't think you need to go and advertise to everybody, oh, we've got the policy ready, we're all ready for someone to die. You don't need to do that. But I think a lot of this is just about being almost gentle, thinking about it, preparing, not panicking people, but you've done the work so that if anything bad happens, then you're ready to deal with it. Right, step 6, prepare your scenario responses. So the first thing here is to say, are you going to, at some stage of the pandemic, run what I call a pandemic operating regime? So are you going to get to a stage, is there a tipping point at which you are going to run your business in a different way? So you're going to do that split team. You're going to increase the communications. You're going to start the pandemic team meeting every day. You're going to do that extra hand washing and the cleaning regimes of different HRs. So you're going to work your organisation in a different way. I think one of the questions there is, say, if you've had a thought through what you're going to do, you need to think about when you're going to implement it. So, is it when the WHO declares a pandemic? Is it when it seems to be many cases, is it the first case in your organisation? So you need to maybe pandemic team needs to monitor each day and then say, actually, this is getting to a tipping point and say, actually, we need to do our the pandemic operating regime and actually put those measures into place, and we now working on new HR rules. So that could be a discussion, and you could try and think through. It might just be, well, we'll kind of make a decision on the day, but do think about those responses there. There's some different government scenarios. So how you're going to deal with it. So if government tells you to close your office, then that's easy. But what other issues can you have which you need to think through? I've got some sort of scenarios you may want to consider. Things like masks. Do you want staff to wear masks, or actually staff are kind of, masks look good, but actually they don't really achieve very much. So think about some of those responses. There's on the education, government advice for education establishment, there's quite a good list of all the different scenarios for schools about what to do in a case of if coronavirus is suspected in your office or place of work, what happens if it's confirmed, if you've got staff coming back from a category 1 country or area in the past 14 days, how you deal with that, what happens if your staff members travel from a category 2 country. And there's the advice of what is a category 1 country, what is a category 2 country. So I think I use that government list as a bit of a basis to think through, right, if we have a suspected case, but actually that person hasn't been tested yet or is going off to be tested, do we close the office, don't we close the office? If the case is confirmed, do we close the office or don't we close the office? And I think there may be government guidance on this, but it sometimes may be down to your organisation to think about how you're going to deal with it. So I think it is worth having a think through what are the different scenarios, what could happen, and how are we going to deal with it? Because I think we have to be careful to say it's not always government's going to tell us what to do. They might say, well, actually, that's your own choice. That's your own choice. You need to make sure that what you're doing is sensible and in line with sort of good practice. And I think here we have to there's a very kind of nuanced piece here to say, actually, the impact of all our pandemic operating regimes, and you've seen all the stuff in China about the shutdown of cities and closing of factories. Sometimes these events can cause as much damage as the actual pandemic in the first place. So if you suddenly put your pandemic operating regime too early, you can cause yourself quite a lot of damage when you don't actually have to. So there's all this balance to be had between actually what is sensible precautions and what is damaging our business. So again, having decisions, thinking through, you might not be able to make all the decisions, but if you thought it through, if you're thinking about how it can happen and what are the different scenarios, and at least thinking through some of the different scenarios, if you have those scenarios happen in real life, then you are ready for them. And you've at least got your team to think about them and some of the questions. Step 7 is prepare your communications plan. So communication is key to good incident management. And your communications will make or break your incident. And unless you communicate people, someone else will fill that vacuum, and the communications people maybe take wrong advice or take just be very angry because you're not providing information. You should be making regular communications, even if it is just to say, we are aware of the issue, we are taking no further precautions need to be taken at the moment, but if we need to do anything more, you'll be informed. And I think you need to if you haven't been communicating with staff, you need to do that now. And you need to put a marker and say, look, we are taking this seriously, we are thinking about it, we don't need you to do anything at the moment, but if you do, you'll be told. So those communications should start now. Some of the sort of key in communications things you need to think out about who will communicate with people internally, how often you're going to do it. It's going to be once a day bulletin. What are they going to need to do and how you're going to do. So what is that process for writing it? Who's going to make the decisions on it, and how is that going to be done? Are you going to have different communications with different groups of people or regions? Or are you going to have one standard bulletin with some local advice, or how are you going to do that? Who signs off the communications? If you get this wrong, your staff could sue you later on. So, you need to get a senior manager to sign that off there. What about your external stakeholders? Do they need information from you? We continue to operate. We don't think this is going to impact us. Please keep buying our product, or please don't worry that your product is going to be delivered from us. So think about who your external holders there. Are you going to running a helpline? And where will the advice be posted? We talked about that already. Questions and answers to staff. Any staff at home, how are you going to communicate with them? Because, maybe the chain of command is more difficult, the staff is working with them. So there's lots and lots of communications issues. You need to think about how your organisation will address them. And, as I said, key communication, key for dispelling rumours, keeping staff motivated and informed. At the same time, is your communication is helping protect your staff and trying to prevent them getting the coronavirus in the first place. So, in conclusion, the 7 steps. Step 1, decide where you're going to get your advice from. Step 2, decide the impact of the coronavirus on your organisation and think about how to make your organisation more resilient. Step 3, mitigate the impacts and look at how you can make your organisation more resilient. Step 4 is decision making and information management. How is that going to be done? And you need to get your team together. Step 5, review your HR practices. Step 6, prepare your scenario response and your pandemic operating regime. And step 7, prepare your communications plan. So those are the 7 steps. In conclusion, now is the time to do something. You need to do that now, not wait until it gets worse. And I think that's for almost any country in the world, you need to do that. Have a number of responses and do much of the thinking now. Have your responses ready so that if it gets worse, you need to do something, you need to get your pandemic operating regime, you are ready to go and you're not scrambling around in the day trying to think about how you're going to deal with it. There'll always be a bit of scrambling around on the day, and perhaps sometimes the scenario might not consider the scenario might not be as you actually thought it was going to be, so there's going to be decision making on the day, but you will need to have those responses ready. You don't need to reply the response now unless you think it's necessary, but you need to have them ready. Avoid starting your response on the back foot. So avoid kind of knee-jerk reactions, which just people know, say, look, these guys are not thought about this, they're not prepared. If you start an incident badly, it's very hard to get back on the front foot and get the confidence of people. You're going to need the confidence of your staff, and you're going to need your staff because this is a major incident and you need to have them on side. And you may struggle to regain their confidence if you start badly. So, thank you very much for listening to this. I'm Charlie McLean, Bristol. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. There's an email address at the end of this video. Or if you want a copy of my document, then there'll be a link to it. So thanks very much.